In this town, silence is heavier than lead. The old rancher warned him, "Don't trust the man who smiles in a gunfight." But the warning came too late. Now, facing the outlaw, the air cracks with tension. The man's hand doesn't twitch. His eyes don't blink. He just smiles. It's a cruel, knowing smirk that hangs in the air a moment before the smoke. It's the kind of smile that signals the end. A promise that blood is about to be spilled, and the man pulling the trigger will enjoy it. Before we ride deeper into the story, if the spirit of the old frontier still stirs your heart, the campfire tales, the courage, the dust, and the honor, then saddle up with us. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you'll never miss another ride through the legends of the Wild West. Now, let's get back to the trail. Silence. The main street of Redemption was a vacuum, a hollowed-out canyon of bleached wood and baked earth, silent as a tomb. Eli stood in the oppressive quiet, the high noon sun a physical weight on his shoulders, pressing him down into the dust. He could feel the town watching. Not from the street was empty, surrendered, but from behind the cracked glass of windows, from the slivers of darkness between barred doors. They were holding their breath. He was holding his. The only sound was the faint, metallic tink, tink, tink of a loose tin sign on the undertaker's office, a grim percussion for the moment. 50 yards away, framed by the shimmering heat, stood the man who called himself Blackwood. He was a contradiction. Lean, almost frail in his long black duster, yet he occupied the street as if he owned the very dirt beneath his boots. Eli, our reluctant hero, felt the rough, unfamiliar grip of the pistol in his hand. This was not his hand. This was not his life. He was a man who built things, shelves, chairs, a new roof for the church. His hands were made for hammers and saws, not for the cold, balanced death of a revolver. He was here because of a moral gravity he could not escape. Because the shadow Blackwood cast was so dark, it threatened to extinguish the last flickering light of this town, a light Eli had come here to find. He was here because no one else would be. And as he stood there, his heart a frantic bird against his ribs, he remembered the old rancher's words, spoken just yesterday over a cup of bitter coffee. Yadidia, his face a map of sun-scorched wrinkles, had looked him dead in the eye. Don't trust the man who smiles in a gunfight. Eli hadn't understood then. A smile was for friends, for jokes, for the relief of a long day done. But Blackwood's hand, hovering near his holster, was steady. His shoulders were relaxed, and his mouth was twisted into a cruel, knowing smirk. It was a smile of profound, intimate mockery. It was a predator's smile, a look of casual ownership over the life trembling at the other end of the street. The promise of violence was no longer a threat. It was a settled fact, a conclusion already written, hanging in the superheated air like a mirage. The smirk was the signature on the death warrant. Eli watched that smirk, and for the first time, he truly understood Jet's warning. This was not a man driven by anger, or greed, or even revenge. This was a man who had found a terrible, holy joy in the final, sacred moment of another's life. The smile was the anticipation of the smoke 24 hours earlier. The air was different then, not yet cracked with the electric tension of a final showdown, but thick, heavy, and brown. It was the taste of the plains, the grit that settled in your teeth and on your soul. Eli sat on the warped plank porch of the general store, a cup of lukewarm, bitter coffee cradled in his hands. He was trying to lose himself in the simple act of watching the wind. It was a restless wind, a bully, pushing dust devils across the empty street in frenzied, chaotic spirals. Beside him, Yedidia, the old rancher, rocked slowly in a chair that complained with every movement. Jed was a man who seemed carved from the same weathered wood as the porch, his skin a roadmap of sun-scorched wrinkles, his eyes holding the flat, infinite distance of the horizon. He just watched the wind blow dust across the plains, a silent observer of the slow decay. Eli was still new to this, the quiet. He had come to Redemption seeking exactly this, an empty place where he could bury the man he had been. He was a carpenter now. He fixed things. He worked with his hands to build, not to break. But the silence of the prairie was deceptive. It didn't heal, it just waited. Jed, in his wisdom, seemed to know the war still raged behind Eli's calm expression. He stopped rocking. The sudden stillness was louder than the wind. He leaned forward, his ancient elbows resting on his knees, his gaze never leaving the swirling brown curtain that was the edge of the world. "They'll be here by tomorrow," he said. His voice was dry, like old leaves scraping on stone. It wasn't a warning. It was a weather report. Eli's shoulders tensed, the muscles knotting under his shirt. He knew who they were. Blackwood, a name that had traveled on the wind for weeks, a rumor of shadow and smoke, now taking physical form and heading straight for them. "It's not my fight, Jed," Eli said, the words tasting like a lie even as he spoke them. "I'm done with that." Jed finally turned his head, his gaze slow, heavy, and appraising. It held no judgment, only a deep, profound sadness. "Fight ain't always something you choose, son. Sometimes it just finds you." He squinted back at the plains. "You'll know him when you see him." Eli frowned, the coffee forgotten in his grip. "Know him how? By the reputation? The way he rides?" Jed shook his head, a slow, grim motion. "By the smile." The word felt alien, a flower growing on a grave. Eli waited, respecting the old man's cadence. Jed measured his words, giving each one weight. "Most men in that line, they're scared, or they're angry, or they're just plain mean. You see it in them, in the eyes. They squint, they twitch, their hand trembles, just a little, no matter how hard they try to hide it." He paused, letting the wind howl a low, mournful note, a perfect symphony for his words. "But not this one, not Blackwood." He leaned in, and his voice dropped, a conspiracy of two against the inevitable. "This one, he smiles." He let the image hang in the air between them, a ghostly apparition. "And I'm gonna tell you something, Eli. Something my father told me, and his father before him." He tapped his own weathered temple. "Don't trust the man who smiles in a gunfight." Eli tried to process it, to fit it into the logic of survival. "He's confident." Then, Eli offered, "He's fast." Jed's answering sound was a dry rasp, almost a scoff. "Confident? No, that ain't it." He looked back at the dust storm, the world disappearing into a swirling brown fog, a perfect visual metaphor for the moral abyss he was describing. "Confidence is quiet. Confidence is steady. This is different. It's amusement." The word chilled Eli more than the wind. It's a man who has stood at that crossroads, the one between the bullet and the breath. So many times he's forgotten it's a sacred place. It's a man who finds the look in another man's eyes, right before the light goes out. Interesting. Jed pushed himself up from the chair, his old bones popping in protest. He put a heavy, calloused hand on Elijah's shoulder, a rare, startling gesture of connection. "It ain't about the speed of his hand, Eli. It's about the sickness in his soul. A man who meets death with a grin is a man who has made peace with the devil. You remember that?" Jed turned and disappeared into the dim light of the store, leaving Eli alone, the wind whipping his hair, the old rancher's words planting a seed of cold, sharp dread. The central mystery of the smile was now a living thing, and it was riding toward them, the wind that Jed had watched. It died. It died abruptly, just after dawn, leaving the town in a state of suspended, agonizing stillness. And into that stillness, they came. Not as a charge, not as a thunder of hooves, but as a slow, deliberate encroachment. 4 riders. They emerged from the brown haze of the plains, 4 dark figures resolving into men, their movement less ride and more a possession. They didn't ride into redemption. They seeped into it, like black ink blotting on dry paper. Their presence was a shadow, a sudden drop in temperature, a weight that settled over the rooftops and pressed the very light out of the air. Eli felt it before he saw it. He was in his small workshop, the smell of fresh cut pine his only comfort, his hands working a piece of wood, trying to sand it smooth. But his hands knew. They stopped. The muscles in his forearms tightened, an old, familiar tension he thought he had worked out of his body. The past. He was a man wrestling with a past he tried to bury, a past measured in powder smoke and the metallic click of a hammer, a past he had fled across 2 territories to escape. He had come here, to this forgotten patch of dirt, precisely because no one knew his name. He had burned the coat, sold the gun, and traded his identity for the simple, honest anonymity of Eli the carpenter. He built things. He repaired the broken. It was his penance. He was rebuilding a life, plank by plank, nail by nail. He believed, truly believed, that if he built enough, if he mended enough broken chairs and leaky roofs, he could wall off the man he used to be. The man whose hands were fast. The man whose name used to make other men twitch. But the past, it doesn't stay buried. It just waits. It waits for a sound, a smell, a feeling. And the feeling of Blackwood and his men settling onto the main street was an earthquake, fracturing the very foundations of the life he had so carefully constructed. His breath caught. The chisel in his hand suddenly felt wrong. Too light, too useless. He heard the saloon doors swing open, but it wasn't the usual raucous sound. It was a slow, heavy creak. Then, silence. Blackwood wasn't there to rob the bank. That was crude. That was fast. Blackwood was a different kind of parasite. He was a man who preferred a slow feed. He and his men dismounted, their movements unhurried. They didn't tie their horses to the rail. They just left them, a sign of ultimate arrogance, knowing no one would dare touch them. Blackwood himself, the man Eli recognized instantly from the descriptions, the man with the long black duster, walked to the center of the street. He didn't shout, he didn't fire his gun into the air. He simply stood there, absorbing the town's fear, letting it feed him. One of his men, a brute with shoulders as wide as an axe handle, walked over to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Miller, a good man, and an old man, a man suited for settling fence disputes, not for this, stepped out. Eli watched from the sliver of his workshop window, his heart a cold stone. He couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. Blackwood's man spoke, his voice low. The sheriff's hand drifted, almost unconsciously, toward his holster. The brute didn't even look at the gun. He just laughed. A short, ugly bark. Then he spat on the sheriff's dusty boot. It was a violation deeper than a punch. It was about humiliation. This was their method. Cruel. Precise. They weren't here to burn the town down. They were here to own it. To bleed it dry, one dawn, one crate of supplies, one shred of dignity at a time. This was protection. Protection from them. The other two men had found out, one into the general store, Jet store, and the other toward the livery. It was an occupation, efficient and absolute. Eli's internal dilemma was no longer an abstract fear, it was a physical sickness. He stayed in the shadows of his workshop, gripping the workbench, his knuckles white. The carpenter, the builder, the man of peace. He repeated the words in his head, a desperate mantra. I am not that man anymore. This is not my fight. He had run from his past, run from the violence that seemed to follow him like a hungry dog. He had run until he found this place, the one place he thought the dog could not track him. But the violence had found him anyway. It had found him, and now it was spitting on his friend's boot. It was walking into the store where the old man sat. It was challenging the very air he breathed. The smell of pine faded, replaced by the phantom, acrid scent of sulfur and old leather. The past wasn't buried. It was just sleeping. And as Blackwood turned, his gaze sweeping the town, his eyes seeming to pierce the very shadows Eli hid in, Eli knew. The man he had been was starting to wake up. Blackwood's shadow fell across the threshold of the general store before he even entered. A sudden, cold eclipse of the morning light. Eli, who had been standing by the counter, his back to the street, felt the change in the atmosphere instantly. The air, thick with the smell of roasted coffee beans, dry tobacco, and burlap, suddenly turned thin and sharp. He had come to check on Jed, to offer a silent presence, but now he was trapped. He kept his back to the door, studying a tin of peaches as if it held the answers to the universe, every nerve in his body screaming. He was the carpenter. He was invisible. He heard the heavy thud of 2 pairs of boots on the planked floor, followed by the jingle of spurs, arrogant and loud in the small space. Jed was at the counter, frozen. Mr. Gable, the store's proper owner, was wiping a glass that was already clean, his hands shaking so badly Eli feared it would shatter. Blackwood's cruelty was not in the thunder of a shout, it was in the deafening, calculated silence of his arrival. He just stood there. He let the fear build. He let the men in the room suffocate on it. He ran a black-gloved finger along a sack of flour, leaving a dark, precise trail in the white powder, a small act of defilement. His brute, the one who had spat on Miller's boot, was less subtle. He moved likable, impatient with the quiet. He brushed past a carefully stacked pyramid of apple crates. Accidentally, the top crate tipped, wobbled, and then crashed to the floor, spilling a cascade of bright red apples that rolled and bounced across the dark wood, coming to rest in every corner of the room. The sound was a violation. In the tense, suffocating quiet, it sounded like a volume of gunshots. And then, another sound. Small feet. Mr. Gamble's daughter, Sarah, barely 7 years old, had been hiding behind a pickle barrel. But she was a child. A mess had been made. Her instinct, pure and uncorrupted, was to fix it. Sarah. No. Gable choked out, but it was too late. She darted forward, her small hand reaching for a perfect, shiny apple that had rolled to a stop near Blackwood's own boot. Before her fingers could brush its skin, the boot moved. It didn't kick. It just covered the apple, blocking her. The girl froze, her hand hovering in the air, her eyes wide as she looked up and up at the tall, dark figure looming over her. The store held its breath. Eli felt his own blood turn to ice. Blackwood leaned down, a slow, fluid uncoiling of his frame. He picked up the apple himself. He held it in his gloved hand, turning it, studying it. He seemed to admire it. The deep red, the perfect, unblemished skin, the simple, honest promise of it. He looked from the apple to the girl, and then his fingers tightened. The sound was wet, obscene, a sharp, pulpy crunch as the skin split and the white flesh ruptured. He crushed it. He crushed it completely until the juice and pulp ran in streams between the black leather seams of his glove. He held the ruined, dripping mask for a beat, letting her see what he had done. And then he smiled. It was not a smile of anger or satisfaction. It was the smile Jet had warned about. It was a smile of pure, cold, horrifying amusement. He had taken this small, perfect, living thing, and he had destroyed it. Just to watch the light go out of a 7-year-old's eyes. He had taught her, in 1 second, that there was nothing pure in the world that he could not ruin. He looked at her, his smile fixed, and he enjoyed her terror. He let the pulp drip onto the floor. Ely watched, frozen in his corner, and the carpenter, the man who built, the man who mended, felt something cold and old, something he had buried under 6 feet of good intentions, begin to claw its way back to the surface. The sight of that smile, aimed at that child, was a declaration of war that no part of him, past or present, could ignore. The store was a coffin of silence, save for the one sound that was worse, the broken, rhythmic hitching of Mr. Gable's breath as he wept into his hands. Blackwood was gone. The shadow had passed, but the cold remained. Eli stood by the peach tent, a ghost in his own life, a spectator to his own failure. This action, this calculated, symbolic execution of a simple piece of fruit, it triggered the avalanche. Eli's gaze drifted from Gable's shaking shoulders to old Yadidia, who stood stock still, his face a mask of iron-gray resignation, his eyes fixed on the pulpy brown mess on the floor. Jed had the wisdom to warn, but not the strength to intervene. Eli looked out the window, through the calico curtain. He saw Sheriff Miller, standing uselessly on the boardwalk across the street, his badge in mockery, his hands knotted on his belt, his gaze turned downward in shame. The town was paralyzed by fear. It wasn't a living, breathing community anymore. It was a collection of isolated, terrified heartbeats, each one trapped in its own small, dark room, praying the shadow would pass them by. They were waiting for a savior, and the carpenter was just as frozen as they were. His internal monologue, a voice he had tried to starve for 3 years, roared back to life. "You ran," it whispered. "You ran from the smoke and the blood, and here it is. You built walls of pine and cedar, but the rot got in anyway." He swore off violence. He swore it on a grave. He swore it on the memory of another child's face, a small boy in a dusty street in Abilene. It wasn't a fight he started. It was a fight he finished. He was fast, then. He was proud of it. He was the man whose name meant something. And in the crossfire, in the chaos of his own making, a boy who had been playing with a hoop and stick had fallen. A stray shot. His stray shot. The tragedy wasn't just the death, it was the realization. The realization that the gun in his hand was a liar, that it promised order but only ever delivered chaos. He had looked at his own hands, kicked in powder and in the boy's blood, and he had vowed they would never take another life. They would only build. They would only mend. He had buried that man, that gunfighter, in an unmarked grave outside Abilene and walked east, toward the rising sun, seeking redemption in anonymity. But now, the contrast. The universe, in its cruel poetry, had presented him with the same equation, but inverted. Blackwood's casual, smiling violence against the absolute, shattered innocence of Sarah. He saw the girl's pale face again, peeking from the curtain, her eyes not wide with fear, but empty, hollowed out. Blackwood hadn't just scared her, he had taught her that the world was a place where things are crushed for sport. The ghost of the boy in Abilene rose up before him. He had failed that boy through his action. He was failing this girl through his inaction. The moral dilemma was a vice, crushing him. To pick up the gun was to betray his oath, to become the monster he had run from. But to keep his hands clean, to stay the carpenter, was to betray this child, to betray the entire town. It was to stand by and allow the void to win. His past had taught him the terrible cost of violence. But Blackwood was teaching him the even more terrible cost of peace. The town was paralyzed. Jed was too old. Gable was too weak. Miller was too beaten. There was no one else. The internal monologue stopped whispering. It spoke, clear and cold. He is the only one who can. And in the terrible, silent logic of the frontier, can always means must. His hand, the carpenter's hand, clenched. The tragedy of his past was that his gun had killed an innocent. The tragedy of his present was that, without that gun, an innocent would be left to die. The oath he made on that grave, it was a luxury he could no longer afford. The decision was made. The carpenter had to die so the gunfighter could live. While we catch our breath by this dusty road, go on and tip your hat to the last rodeo. Give this story a like, and subscribe so you can ride with us again soon. All right then, let's get back on the trail. The echo of the crushed apple, a wet, final sound, seemed to stain the air long after Blackwood had gone. He and his man left the store not with a bang, but with a swagger, the jingle of their spurs a departing note of mockery. They left behind a vacuum, a silence so profound it was louder than any scream. Mr. Gable had slumped against the counter, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking in a rhythm of helpless, silent sobs. The apples, the bright red apples, were scattered across the floor like the first drops of a coming massacre. Eli stood frozen, the tin of peaches still heavy in his hand, a useless anchor to a life that had just evaporated. He was the carpenter. He was invisible. He was a liar. He had told himself he was mending things, but he had stood by and watched the child's spirit be torn apart. Then he heard it. Not a cry, not a whimper, a small, hitched breath, a desperate, tiny gasp for air in a room that had none left. He turned, his movement stiff, robotic, and he saw her. Sarah was hiding behind the thin calico curtain of the front window, the one her mother had sewn with little yellow flowers. She thought she was hidden, but the sunlight, now streaming back in, turned the pale cloth translucent. He saw her silhouette, small and fragile. And through a gap, he saw her face. It was pale. Not just pale, but a bloodless, porcelain white, a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. Her eyes were the thing that broke him. They were wide, locked open, and utterly empty. She was not crying. Crying would have been a mercy. This was the stillness after the breaking, the awful quiet of a soul that has just seen the void. She was staring at the brow, dripping pulp on the floor, the ruin of the apple, and she was seeing the world as Blackwood saw it, a thing to be crushed. The sight of her face, that small, innocent face, now a canvas for a monster's art. It was a physical blow. The careful, painstakingly constructed walls of his new life, the penance of the carpenter, the lie of his peace, it all came down in a silent, crushing avalanche. His resolve didn't just break, it shattered. He realized, in that awful, clarifying moment, that his peace was just a high-class word for cowardice. He hadn't been building a new life, he had been building a hiding place, and the world had found him. The moral equation was now terrifyingly simple. The existence of that child's face and the existence of Blackwood's smile was a contradiction the universe could not abide. One of them had to be erased. He, Eli, the man who had run from his own hands, was the only one present who could balance the scales. He set the tin of peaches down on the counter. The small clink of metal on wood was a gavel. The decision was made. His development was shown through action. He didn't speak a word to Gable. There was nothing to say. Words were useless now. He turned and walked out of the store. The man who walked out was not the man who had walked in. The hesitant, downcast shuffle was gone. His boots struck the porch with a hard, even, rhythmic thud. He walked onto the main street, into the oppressive sunlight, and his eyes were no longer looking for escape. They were scanning, measuring, calculating. He walked to his simple buckboard wagon by the workshop, the symbol of his quiet trade. He moved with a terrifying economy of motion. He didn't toss the tools aside, he placed them, quickly, quietly. Then he knelt on the wagon bed, his hand moving to a loose floorboard near the front, one that looked no different from the others. He pulled. It came up with a soundless SHHFD of old wood. There, in the dark, hollowed-out space beneath, lay a long, heavy shape wrapped in oilcloth. He reached in. His hand did not tremble. His fingers found the familiar shape, the grip worn as smooth as polished stone. He pulled it out. He unwrapped it. It was an old, worn-out pistol, a heavy, single-action Colt. The bluing was long gone, the metal a flat, deadly gray. But it was clean. It shone with a dull, menacing light, perfectly oiled, perfectly maintained. It was not a tool he had abandoned. It was a sin he had merely paused. This was the life he thought he'd left behind. This was the ghost. He checked the cylinder. A practiced, fluid roll of his thumb. Loaded. It had always been loaded. He stood up, the gun a familiar weight in his hand, a cold, terrible comfort. He slid it into the waistband of his pants, the cold metal biting into his skin, a sharp reminder of who he truly was. The carpenter was dead. The man he had run from was back. Eli stepped off the boardwalk. The single step from the wooden porch of his workshop onto the hard-baked dirt of the main street felt like a step into another world, a line crossed from which there was no return. The gun, the ghost, was a heavy, cold reality against his skin, tucked into his waistband. It was a poison he had just swallowed, a familiar sickness spreading through his veins. And as his boot hit the dust, the pacing of the world slowed. Time itself seemed to coagulate, to thicken like cold molasses. The high noon sun beat down, but the world felt cold, leached of all color, a monochrome study in fear. He was in the center of the street, and he began to walk. The town of redemption was gone. In its place was a stage set, a hollow facade of a town, and he was the only actor. He felt the weight of the town's fear not as an emotion, but as a physical pressure, an atmosphere so dense it was difficult to breathe. It was in the wood, in the glass, in the very air. Doors were bolted. He could see the thick oak bars slid across the inside of the mercantile, the blacksmith's heavy doors chained from within. The hotel, usually a place of sparse but steady traffic, was a tomb, its front door locked, a chariot wedged beneath the handle, visible through the glass. Windows were shuttered, not just curtains drawn, but heavy wooden shutters, built for prairie storms, now battened down against a human one. The entire street, from the bank to the assay office, was a line of blind, boarded-over eyes. It was a town pretending to be dead, praying the reaper would pass by. But he knew they weren't there. He could feel the eyes, tiny pinpricks of terror boring into his back from the darkness, from the slivers between the shutters, from the cracks in the doors. He was their focus. He was the single, moving thing in a world that had collectively, instinctively, frozen. He was the rabbit, and the hawk was circling. But he was also the man walking for the other rabbits, the ones hiding in their burrows, And this knowledge brought no comfort, only a profound, crushing sense of isolation. He was completely alone. He was not one of them, the carpenter, the mender. He was not the man they had known for 2 years. He was a stranger again, a new kind of threat, one they had summoned with their silent, desperate pleas. He was walking for them, but he was not with them. They had pushed him out here, into the killing sun, while they cowered in the dark. The only sound. The world was utterly devoid of it. No dogs barked. No children cried. No wagon wheels turned. The saloon, 50 yards ahead, was a gaping black mouth, silent. The only sound was the wind. Hello, sibilant hiss that snaked through the alleyways, carrying the scent of dust and something metallic, fear. And then, his own sounds, amplified by the vacuum. The thud of his boot heels on the packed earth. Heavy, measured, a funeral drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. And beneath that, a sound he had sworn he would never hear again. The faint, sharp, metallic jingle of his own spurs. He had forgotten he'd even put them on. They were part of the ritual, part of the resurrection of the man he hated. The sound was an accusation. It was an announcement. It was the jingle of the past, catching up to him with every single, solitary step. He was alone, walking in a dead town, wrapped in the sounds of his own history, a ghost walking to meet a demon. The narrative follows his boots. Thud, jingle, a pause, thud, jingle. Each step is a lifetime, a chronological progression from the man he was pretending to be, back to the man he swore he would never be again. Each step is heavy, weighted with the iron of a past he could not outrun in the unbearable gravity of the present moment. He is walking in a straight line toward the saloon, toward the dark, quiet center of town. 100 yards. The saloon doors are 2 black rectangles, 2 open graves waiting to be filled. His focus narrows, the shuttered windows on his periphery blurring into a single, vague smear of judgment and fear. The world shrinks until it is only this dusty path and the absolute darkness at the end of it. The internal struggle is a silent war raging behind his eyes. The camera of the mind's eye would slow zoom on his face, a landscape of pure, agonizing conflict. His brow is furrowed, not in anger, but in a kind of profound concentration, the look of a man trying to solve an impossible sum in his head. This is the rhythmic acceleration toward the climax. The pace is set by his heart, a low, pounding drum against his ribs. Never again. The words of his oath, sworn on that small, unmarked grave in Ebleen, echo with every step. Never again this hand. Never again this coldness. The ghost of the boy he accidentally killed walks beside him, a small, accusing shadow in the blinding sun. You promised me, the ghost whispers. Elias John tightens, the muscle leaping under his skin. I did. Then, another image, brighter, sharper, more immediate, burns the ghost away. Sarah's face, pale, hollow, the light snuffed out before the body had died. Blackwood's smile, crushing the apple, crushing her spirit. The boy was a tragedy of his action. Sarah is a tragedy of his inaction. The dilemma is a physical pain, a blade twisting in his gut. I am breaking my oath to keep a promise I never made. He passes the mercantile. He sees the curtain, the small, flowered calico, limp in the dead air. He sees the dark, wet stain on the boardwalk where the ruined apple pulp had dripped. The sight is a spur, digging into his side, brutal and sharp. His step quickens. Thud jingle, thud jingle. The rhythm accelerates. The pensive pause is gone. 75 yards. He passes the blacksmiths. The cold, dead forge stands like a monument to the town's paralysis. He feels the sweat on his back, a cold sheet. The sun is a white hot coin on the back of his neck. The gun against his belly is a comfort. The gun against his belly is a curse. Both are true. The internal monologue is no longer words. It is images. The boy's surprised eyes. Sarah's empty ones. The boy. Sarah. The boy. Sarah. They flash, one after the other, a terrible lantern show, pushing him forward, fueling his resolve. 50 yards. He passes the undertaker's office. The loose tin sign. Beep, beep, beep. A dry, metallic metronome for his approach. The sound scrapes against his raw nerves. He can smell the saloon now. Stale beer, unwashed bodies, and something else. The cold, metallic scent of ozone. The scent of blackwood. His eyes lock on the black rectangles of the saloon doors. There is no one there, but he is felt. He knows he is being watched. The prey has now become the hunter. The carpenter's hands, the ones that knew the grain of wood and the heft of a hammer, are now balled into fists, the knuckles white. The slow zoom is complete. We are on his eyes. They are no longer conflicted. They are no longer the carpenter's eyes. They are not even a gunfighter's eyes. They are the eyes of a man who has weighed too unbearable, soul-destroying costs, and has finally, irrevocably, made his choice. The internal struggle is over. All that is left is the grim, cold arithmetic of the act. He stops. 40 yards, the center of the street. The walk is done. The silence that follows is louder than any sound, the final, agonizing snap of the tension. The spring is wound, the thud jingle of his spurs has stopped. The silence that rushes in to fill the void is absolute, a physical pressure that shoves against Eli's eardrums. We land back in the present moment. The long walk is over. He is here. The standoff. He stands in the baked, white dust of the main street, a solitary figure of resolve, the sun a white-hot coin on the back of his neck. 50 yards. The distance is a lifetime. 50 yards away, having emerged from the black rectangle of the saloon, stands Blackwood. He is not hiding. He is not taking cover. He stands in the open, his long black duster a stark column of shadow against the bright, bleached wood of the buildings behind him. He is a portrait of impossible, arrogant stillness. His shoulders are relaxed. His hands hang loose, the right one inches from his holster, but it does not twitch. It is as still as a stone. Eli can feel his own heart, a frantic bird trapped in the cage of his ribs, a stark contrast to the man he is facing. He is breathing shallowly, tasting the grit on his teeth. He is aware of the shuttered windows, the unseen eyes, the entire town holding its breath with him. The tension is a wire, stretched to the point of shrieking, and then the silence is broken. Not by a word, not by the tink-tink of the undertaker's sign. It is broken by Blackwood. He shifts his weight, just slightly. A soft, airy sound escapes his lips. A chuckle. A quiet, private ha. 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 It is not a laugh. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated contempt. It is the sound of a man looking at a stray dog that has bared its teeth, right before the kick. The sound is a violation, a scalpel slicing through the taut silence, aimed directly at Eli's nerve. And with a chuckle, the smirk is back. It returns to Blackwood's face like a familiar mask, but it is wilder this time. It is a grotesque stretching of his features, a baring of teeth that is both a promise and a mockery. It's the smile Eli saw in the store, the smile that crushed the apple, the smile that hollered out a child's eyes. But now it is amplified, broadcast across the 50 yards, a banner of his sickness. It says after all that, you, the carpenter? It says this is amusing. This is a diversion. The smirk is a weapon, and it digs deep into Eli, searching for the soft parts, the doubt, the carpenter who just wants to go back to his workshop. For a half second, Eli falters. The ghost of Aveline rises, whispering, "This is the pride. This is the sin you ran from. A man is laughing at you. What will you do?" But the memory of Sarah's face is stronger. The image of her pale, empty shock burns brighter. This is not about pride. This is not about him. This is about the smile itself. The smirk, wider this time, is not a sign of confidence. Eli feels the truth of Judd's words land in his gut. It is not confidence. It is a rot. It is a hollowness. It is a man so dead inside that the only thing that makes him feel alive is the terror in another's eyes. The chuckle is the sound of the void, and the smirk is its shape. The fear in Eli doesn't vanish. It clarifies. It turns from a paralyzing fog into a cold, dense, heavy point of light. He is not here to fight a man. He is here to erase a smile. Eli stares. He holds the gaze of the man 50 yards away, and the world dissolves. The shuttered windows, the undertaker's sign, the oppressive sun. It all fades to a distant hum. There is only the smirk. Jed's words are ringing in his ears, a frantic, clanging bell. Don't trust the man who smiles in a gunfight. It's a sickness. It's amusement. He looks at the smile, this wide, grotesque curve of a mouth, and he searches for the sickness. He searches for the amusement. He stares, not at the idea of Blackwood, the shadow, the monster, but at the man. He looks past the bravado, and as he really looks, truly, with the eyes of a man who has lived with his own ghosts and knows the shape of true fear, he sees it. The reveal is not a thunderclap. It is a quiet, dawning, horrifying realization. The smile is wrong. It's a lie. The corners of the mouth are pulled up, yes, but the skin around them is white, stretched too tight over the bone. It's a grimace, a rictus, a mask of flesh pulled into a shape that doesn't belong. He looks higher, at the man's eyes, and his heart stops. Jed was wrong. Or, at least, he was only half right. The eyes are not smiling. The eyes are not amused. The eyes are not cold. They are too wide. They are stretched open, unblinking, fixed on Eli with a stare of pure, adrenaline-fueled, primal terror. They are the eyes of the man in the store, Gable, when the apples fell. They are the eyes of a horse trapped in a fire. There is no sickness in them. There is no joy. There is only the void, and Blackwood is staring straight into it. And then, another detail. A single, perfect bead of sweat. It detaches from Blackwood's hairline, just at the temple, and begins a slow, agonizingly clear descent. It traces a line through the grime, a clean, wet path down his cheek, until it hangs, trembling, from the man's jawline. A man who is amused doesn't sweat like that. A man who is confident doesn't have eyes that are screaming. The stillness. Eli had mistaken it for relaxation. It is not. It is rigidity. It is the stillness of a man locking every muscle in his body, forcing himself not to tremble, commanding his hand not to twitch. The smile isn't a sign of confidence. It's the last, most desperate defense of a man who has nothing left. It is a mask, a desperate, terrified tick. This is the mystery solved. The emotionally complex antagonist is not a demon. He is a fraud. He is a hollow man, a shell, whose entire reputation has been built on this one terrifying piece of theater. He crushes apples in front of children and spits on old men because he is a bully, and bullies are, at their core, cowards. He is a man bluffing against death. He is smiling because he is so terrified. He has forgotten how to do anything else. He is smiling because he thinks it will save him. And in this moment, Blackwood, the shadow, the legend, evaporates. He is just a man. A pathetic, scared man in a dusty black coat, who is about to die, and he knows it. All his life, this bluff has worked. The smile has been enough. The fear he projects has been his shield. But it is not working on Eli. It is not working because Eli, the reluctant hero, the man who has wrestled with his own past, has just looked through the mask and seen the terrified child behind it. While we catch our breath by this dusty road, go on and tip your hat to the last rodeo. Give this story a like and subscribe so you can ride with us again soon. All right then, let's get back on the trail. This delayed reveal, this sudden, terrible, intimate knowledge, it changes everything. The 50 yards of dust are no longer a killing field. They are a stage, and the play has just been exposed as a farce. In the instant Eli sees the mask for what it is, a shield of rictus error, the entire architecture of his own fear collapses. It does not fade, it evaporates. The ghost of Abilene, the small boy's face that had haunted his sleep for 3 years, the heavy, suffocating weight of his broken oath, it all just lifts. It becomes noise. It becomes irrelevant. The moral equation, once a complex and agonizing algebra of sin and necessity, simplifies into a single, cold sum. All of it, the pounding heart, the shallow breath, the carpenter's doubt, the gunfighter's shame, is washed away. And in its place, not anger, not the hot, righteous fury he had expected. What replaces it is a grim, clear-eyed focus, a profound, hollow, and absolute certainty. It is the focus of the carpenter, the man who draws a line on a piece of wood and knows, with mathematical precision, exactly where the saw must cut. The cut is not made in anger. It is made because the line is there. The line has been drawn. He is no longer fighting a monster. He is no longer in a showdown with a demon who finds amusement in death. He realizes, facing a scared man. A pathetic, hollow man who has built a life out of a lie so potent it has strangled towns and ruined lives. He is facing a terrified bully, and the act he is about to perform is no longer a battle. It is a mercy. It is a sad, necessary, and tragic solution. It is the putting down of a rabid animal. And this, more than anything, is the final tragedy, that this pathetic, frightened creature is too dangerous to be allowed to live. Eli's shoulders, which had been densed up to his ears, dropped. His hand, which had been a white-knuckled claw, relaxes. His breathing, once a shallow gasp, becomes deep, slow, and rhythmic. He is, in this moment, the only calm thing in the entire universe. And Blackwood sees it. Across the 50 yards, a distance that should have made such subtleties invisible, Blackwood sees the change. He is a predator. His entire life depends on reading the fear in his prey. He has been staring at Eli, projecting his mask, and waiting for the crack, the falter, the break. And he has just seen it, but it wasn't the break he expected. He saw Eli's body relax. He saw the tension leave him. He saw the doubt, which had been rolling off the man in visible waves, simply cease. And in its place, he saw the one expression his entire arsenal of terror was not equipped to handle. He saw pity. He saw the eyes of the carpenter, the man who mends, look at him, and feel sorry for him. This pity is the bullet before the gun. It is the final, devastating truth. The pity in Eli's eyes is a mirror, reflecting back the naked, screaming terror that Blackwood has been trying to hide. It is the confirmation that his bluff has failed. The mask shatters. The smirk, the wide, stretched, terrifying mask. It twitches. It breaks. It falters, collapsing in on itself. The bead of sweat, which had trembled on his jawline, drops, a final, tiny punctuation mark on his life. The wide, terrified eyes blink. Once, twice. The rigidity is gone, replaced by a visible, palsied tremor. The facade is shattered. The legend of Blackwood is dead, erased by a single look of compassion. And all that is left is the scared man, alone in the dust, facing the carpenter who has become his executioner. The smile faltered. It did not just fade, it cracked, like a pane of glass struck by a stone. The lines of fracture spreading from his lips, to his eyes, to his very soul. The mask of the monster, the terrifying, hollow thing that was Blackwood, shattered. In that one, silent, stretched out eternity, a half-second of doubt, the pity in Eli's eyes did what no bullet ever could. It annihilated him. The void he had projected, the terror he had manufactured and used as a shield, was suddenly, agonizingly, turned inward. He was seen. He was a fraud. He was, in the calm, steady, pitying eyes of the carpenter, just a scared man. And this realization was a death sentence. The panic, which had been a cold, rigid stillness, now broke into a hot, spastic, kinetic terror. He had to do something. He had to prove the pity wrong. He had to bring the monster back. He had to make the smoke. Blackwood desperately drew. It was not a draw. It was a clawing, a pathetic, fumbling lunge for the iron at his hip. His hand, the one he had held so rigid, spasmed, his black-gloved fingers catching on the lip of the leather. It was the clumsy, ugly, chaotic motion of a man who was already dead, a chicken flapping its wings after the axe has fallen. He was drawing not to win, not to kill, but simply because it was the only action his terror-filled body knew how to take. It was a reflex, the last twitch of a life built on a lie. But Eli was already gone. The carpenter, the man of doubt, the ghost of Abilene, the agonizing moral dilemma, it had all evaporated with a moment of clarity. He was centered. He was free from his internal conflict, and in that freedom, there was a terrible, silent, and perfect peace. He did not react to Blackwood's desperate lunge. He was already moving. His motion was not the panic spasm of his opponent. His motion was fluid, economical. It was the motion of a man who had done this 1,000 times in a life he hated, but it was also the motion of the carpenter, a single, precise, and inevitable act. His hand, the one that knew the grain of wood and the balance of a hammer, found the worn grip of the cold. It was not a retrieval, it was a homecoming. The gun was not a weapon, it was a toolie. It was the saw, and the line had been drawn. His thumb did not pull the hammer simply fell back, a soundless click in the roaring of the blood in his ears. Time stretched. He saw Blackwood's face, the smirk now a grotesque of pure, infantile terror. He saw the man's gun, barely clearing the leather, snagged and tangled. He saw the bead of sweat finally drop from Blackwood's jaw, arcing through the air like a tiny, falling star. He felt the perfect, familiar weight in his own hand. He was not a gunfighter. He was not a carpenter. He was, in this one, clear, cold instant, a necessity. He was the answer to the question Blackwood's entire life had been asking. His arm was level. His eye was true. The ghost of the boy in Abilene did not whisper. Sarah's face did not flash. There was only the line and the cut that had to be made. A single shot. It did not boom. It cracked the silence. It was a dry, sharp, definitive sound. The sound of a large bone breaking. The sound of a great tree falling in a forest where no one else was. The sound of a period being placed at the end of a long, terrible, and pathetic sentence. The smoke, thick and white and smelling of sulfur, instantly billowed from his hand. A sudden, ghostly cloud that obscured the world, a curtain falling on the play. It was the only sound in the dead town. A single, piercing crack, followed by a silence even heavier than the one before. The single crack echoed, and echoed, and echoed. A sound too big for the small, silent street, bouncing off the false fronts and shuttered windows before finally being swallowed by the vast, indifferent plains. The smoke, thick and acrid and white, hung in the air, a ghostly curtain between the living and the dead. For a long, stretched out second, there was no movement. Only the smoke and the ringing in Eli's ears. Then, through the thinning, sulphurous cloud, he saw it. Blackwood fell. He did not collapse. He did not crumble. He fell like a statue pulled from its pedestal, a single, rigid, graceless toppling, his body hitting the dust with a thud so final, so heavy, it seemed to shake the very ground. The smirk was gone, wiped clean. The bullet had erased the lurch. In its place, on the face of the man who had terrified a territory, was a look of stunned surprise. The eyes were wide, not with terror, but with a kind of blank, idiotic what? The mouth was still a small O, the final shape of his last, panicked breath. He was a man who had bluffed against death his entire life, and in the last possible second, he had been utterly, completely, and fatally shocked to find it holding a better hand. Eli stood, his arms still extended, the heavy Colt a dead weight, and Hank pulling him back to a life he despised. The smoke cleared, rising in lazy, dissipating tendrils, like a soul leaving a body, revealing the ugly, simple, and pathetic truth on the ground. The air was sharp, clear, and smelt of powder. He began to walk, slowly. His boots, which had marched with such grim purpose, now dragged, the spurs scraping the dust with a sound like a drawn-out sigh. He walked toward him, each step a confirmation, each step a nail in the coffin of his own hard-won peace. There was no triumph. There was no surge of righteous victory. The clear-eyed focus of the climax was gone, replaced by a thick, cold, and nauseating hollowness. He had killed a man. He had broken his secret oath. He had looked into the void and he had pulled the trigger. This was not an uplifting victory. It was a chore, a filthy, soul-staining, tragic necessity. He had stopped a monster, yes, but to do it, he had to become one, just for a moment. And that moment, he knew, would last forever. He stopped, standing over the body, looking down. The legend of Blackwood was just a skinny, grime-streaked man in a too large duster, his eyes staring, unseeing, at the pale blue sky. A small, dark stain was already spreading across his chest, turning the black cloth blacker. The townspeople, a sound, a creak, a single, hesitant scrape of a boot on wood. Eli did not look up, but he felt it. The great, collective, terrified breath the town had been holding was released. A door opened, then another. They began to emerge, hesitant. They did not run into the street. They did not cheer. They moved like survivors emerging from a cellar after a tornado. One by one, peeking from their doorways, their faces pale, their eyes wide. Mr. Gable, the blacksmith, even old Jed, who stepped onto the mercantile porch, his face a mask of profound, ancient sadness. They stared, not at Eli, the man who had saved them, but at the body, at the thing in the dust. They were confirming it was real, that the shadow was truly gone. Their hesitant, shuffling presence only deepened Eli's isolation. He was not one of them. He was the tool they had needed, the gun, the butcher. He had done the terrible, necessary thing they could not do, and in doing so, he had separated himself from them, from the world he had tried so desperately to build. Forever. He just stood there, the smoke of his own damnation clinging to his clothes, a solitary, grim figure over his kill. Eli stood over him. The world was a muffled, ringing void. The townspeople were just shapes, hesitant blotch of color in his peripheral vision, a silent, watching jury. He looked down at the man in the dust. The legend, the shadow, the body. The dark stain on the duster was wider now, a spreading pool of black on black, glistening whitely in the cruel sun. The man was a thing, a piece of meat. The carpenter and Eli saw only a problem that had been solved. The man in him felt nothing, just a vast, cold, and echoing emptiness. Then, a sound, a wet, ragged, gasping. A bubble of red foam appeared at the man's lips. He was not gone. Eli's jaw tightened. The act was not yet complete. He knelt, his knee cracking in the silence, sinking into the dust beside the dying man. He was close enough now to smell the fear, a rank, metallic odor under the sharp tang of gunpowder. He was close enough to see the man's eyes, the eyes that had been wide with stunned surprise. They were still wide, but the focus was gone. They were fading, clouding over, the vibrant terror of a moment ago dissolving into a milky, childlike confusion. The eyes, they moved. They found Eli's. They registered the man kneeling over him. The lips, slick with pink foam, tried to move. They worked, pathetically, against the paralysis that was claiming them. A whisper, so quiet it was more a breath of air than a sound, escaped. A terrible, shuddering intake of air, a rattle deep in the chest. He didn't finish. The words hung in the air, a final, broken, pathetic fragment. I didn't mean it. I didn't want this. I didn't think you would do it. The sentence was a life unfinished, a confession of a man who had never meant any of it, whose entire existence was a bluff that had just been called in the most final way. It was the last, desperate protest of the terrified child behind the mask. He was not a demon. He was just a man who didn't. Eli, the carpenter, the gunfighter, the reluctant hero, the executioner. He looked into those fading, confused eyes. He heard the unfinished sentence, and in that moment, there was no monster. There was no enemy. There was no Blackwood. There was only this ending, this awful, shared, human tragedy. Eli simply nodded, a single, slow, acknowledging movement, a gesture of profound, terrible, and silent understanding. It was a moment of tragic, human connection. The nod said, I know. It said, I see you. It said, it's done. It was the final act of pity. It was the only absolution he could offer. He saw the recognition in Blackwood's eyes. He saw the man see the nod. The confusion cleared, just for a fraction of a second. The terror was gone. The surprise was gone. There was only a stillness, a release. The tension left the man's face. The lines of his life, his fear, his bluff, they all went slack. The eyes went dull. He was gone. Eli stayed there, kneeling in the dust, the sound of the last, wet breath seeming to hang in the air. He was alone, now, utterly alone. The town was still silent, their fear of Blackwood now replaced by their awe and fear of him. He was the butcher. He was the savior. He was the thing they would tell stories about, the thing they would whisper about, the thing they would never, ever understand. He was the man who had knelt and watched another man die. He pushed himself up, his limbs heavy, his joints aching. He stood, a solitary figure in the center of the street, the body at his feet, the town 100 yards away. The gun, the Colt. It was still in his hand, a heavy, smoking, ugly, necessary thing. He looked at it. The ghost, the sin, the tool, the lie. It had saved them, but it had damned him. It had kept his body alive, but it had broken his soul. He had sworn, on a grave, never again. And here it was. He had broken his oath, but in breaking it, he had found a strange, bitter peace. The ghost of Abilene was quiet, not forgiven, but quiet. It was finished. His violent past. It wasn't something he could run from. It wasn't something he could bury. It was something he had to face, to use, and to kill. He had just done it. He made a choice. He had used the gunfighter to save the carpenter. With his free hand, he reached for the buckle of the gun belt. It was not his. It belonged to the man he had been, the man he had just resurrected, and the man he was now burying for good. He undid the buckle, the heavy belt, with its holster, its loops, and its cold, heavy iron, fell from his waist. It hit the dust with a soft, final thud, a sound of surrender, a sound of release. He let it lie there, in the dirt, next to the man it had killed. He turned his back on the body. He turned his back on the gun. He turned his back on the man he had been. His violent past was now truly over. He turned his back on the body, on the gun, on the man he had been, the ghost he had resurrected, and the past he had finally, truly put in the ground. The street was silent, but it was a different silence. The oppressive, terrified, pressurized quiet was gone, replaced by a thin, hollow, awkward vacuum. The air was still sharp with the tang of sulfur, the smell of the single shot that had ended one life and forever defined another. He began to walk back, not toward his workshop, not toward the anonymity he had craved. He walked, his steps measured and heavy, his boots dragging in the white dust, back toward the general store. The townspeople, who had been hesitant shadows in doorways, were now fully emerged, a scattered, silent crowd of witnesses. They did not part for him. They were not in his way. They were a static, frightened audience, and he was the actor, alone on the stage, his terrible part in the play now finished. He felt their eyes on him, and there was no gratitude in their gaze. Not yet. There was only awe and fear. He was no longer Eli the carpenter. He was the man who had killed Blackwood. He was the lightning rod. He was the thunder. He had done the thing they could not, and for that, he was now other. He was separate. He was the butcher. He walked past Sheriff Miller, who looked down, unable to meet his gaze, shuffling his feet in the dust. He walked past Mr. Gable, who stood on the mercantile porch, his hands still shaking, his eyes wide and wet. Eli did not look at them. His focus was singular. He reached the porch of the general store. Yadidia was standing there, his ancient frame leaning against a support post, his arms crossed. He had not moved. He had watched it all. Eli stopped, his foot on the bottom step. This was the judgment. This was the man who had warned him. The man who knew. He looked up at Jed, his face empty, his soul scraped raw. The old rancher just looked back. His weathered face was a map of deep, profound sadness. He knew the cost. He knew what he was looking at. As Eli passed him, Jed simply nodded. A single, slow, almost imperceptible dip of his chin. It was not a nod of thanks. It was not a nod of approval. It was a nod of understanding, a tragic, shared, and terrible acknowledgement. The old rancher understood his warning was only half the truth. He had warned Eli about the man who smiles in a gunfight, but he had never warned him about the terrible, hollow price of being the man who doesn't. Eli passed him, the silent judgment complete, and stopped at the doorway of the store. He stood on the threshold, a man of smoke and death, peering into the shadows, and from the shadows, she peered back. Sarah. She was hiding behind her father's legs, her small fingers clutching a fistful of his trousers. She peeked out, her eyes, they were not empty. Not anymore. The hollow, vacant shock that Blackwood had put there was gone. In its place was fear, but it was a different fear. It was the fear of a child looking at something loud and big and unknown. And beneath the fear, there was curiosity. She was seeing him. He, the man who had brought the thunder, had broken the spell. He was the killer. He was the reason there was a dead man in the street. And he had done it. For her. The carpenter, the mender, the man who had failed one child in Abilene, looked at this one. He did not speak. Words were useless. They were the things of the old world. Instead, he knelt. The motion was stiff, his body aching, his soul exhausted. He went down on one knee, in the dust of the porch, bringing himself down from the level of the monster, the killer, down to the level of a child. He was just a man, on his knee, in the dust. He looked at her, and he gave her a small, tired, but genuine smile. It was the first one, the first real smile the town had seen. It was not Blackwood's mask of terror. It was not the town's grimace of fear. It was a simple, human, and heartbreakingly sad smile. It was the smile of a man who had seen the void and stepped back from it. It was a smile that cost everything. It was the carpenter's smile, and the sun, which had been a wide, oppressive, judging eye, had begun its descent. The sky was no longer a bleached, pale sheet. Clouds, which had been gathering on the horizon, now broke, and a new light, a different light, slanted across the street. It was not the dark to light transition of a simple victory. It was the harsh, judging light of high noon, softening. It was a golden, forgiving, and complex light. It was the light of evening. It did not erase what had happened. It did not wash the blood from the street or the sin from his soul. It just illuminated the new truth. This was a new, hopeful, and hard-won peace. Sarah did not smile back, but she did. Let go of her father's leg. It was enough. It was a beginning. It was the mending, if this story stirred a memory or two. Saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.